Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best builds now for all the AD carries in patch 9.23. We saw Stormrazor get changed in this patch. We also saw some Zeal items get changed, so the build pass for certain AD carries did get shifted a little bit here in 9.23, and we're going to be going over that in this video. Now, a few AD carries that didn't see their build pass get changed are Senna, Ezreal, and Kalista, so we're not going to be going over theirs in this video because you want to be running exactly what you'd be running on them in previous patches. So let's just start things off here by taking a look at the starting item that you should be running on all your AD carries. If you're unfamiliar, Doran's Shield did get nerfed in this patch. The regen that you get from it is now weaker for ranged champions, so it's going to be 66% effective for ranged users in this patch, and that now means that this item you pretty much never want to go it for AD carries. Stat-wise, it's performing a lot worse than Doran's Blade on pretty much every AD carry for this patch. There's not too many people that are running it, but in previous patches, you'd want to run Doran's Shield sometimes if you're in a more difficult matchup or if you just aren't very confident in your AD carry play. But in this patch now, it just seems like pretty much every single game, Doran's Blade is going to be the better option. So the big ticket item that got changed in this patch is Stormrazor, and as a result, AD carries build pass are changing up here for 9.23. We saw crit being added back into the item. You now have 25% crit. You also do have a lot more energized damage, so it got increased by 70 there, from 50 up to 120. Attack speed got decreased by 15%, AD got decreased by 5, but overall with the changes there, with the crit, the energized damage going up, it is a much better item now for you to pick up earlier on in the game. So we're going to start things off here with Ashe, and we're going to go in alphabetical order throughout this video when going over the AD carries. Now for Ashe's build in this patch, for a lot of AD carries, there's a couple options right now, and Ashe is one of them. So you can either go for a Boar Crush into Runins and IE, very standard build on Ashe that you'd run in previous patches, or if you want more upfront damage, if you want a higher DPS build, then going for Stormrazor into Runins and then for the Infinity Edge is a great option for this patch as well. So whether you go Bork or whether you go Stormrazor, it does come down to a few different scenarios. So if the enemy team is going to be very tanky, if they got a bunch of tanks on their team, then I would almost always go for Bork first on Ashe, just so you have the ability to deal with those champions a little bit easier. If the enemy team is very squishy, they don't have a ton of tanks, then going for Stormrazor is going to allow you to deal a lot more damage to them. Now your base timings and how well you're doing in the early game can also influence which item you decide to go for. So if you're snowballing really hard, if you get a couple kills early on in lane and you have enough for a BF sword on your first base, then go towards that BF sword, build towards the Stormrazor. It's going to be the higher DPS option over the Blade of the Ruined King there. So if you want to press your advantage harder in the laning phase, then go for the Stormrazor. If you're not doing too well in the laning phase though, or if you don't get a good base timing and you don't have enough for a BF sword, then just grab the components towards Blade of the Ruined King. It does have a much nicer build path than Stormrazor does, so if you don't have enough gold for a BF sword, then just work towards your Bork. Now for Caitlyn, she does have her number one build pretty much already discovered in patch 9.23, which is Infinity Edge into Stormrazor and then a rapid fire cannon or a static shiv or phantom dancer as your third item. You just want to grab a Zeal item there as your third item on Caitlyn. So with the IE into Stormrazor, this is just going to give you the most amount of DPS possible for any two items. So it allows you to hit really hard there with two items on Caitlyn, and it allows you to have a very strong mid-game spike. So next up here for Draven, he's actually doing very well with a Stormrazor rush in this patch. It's actually performing better than a Bloodthirster rush on him for 9.23. So by going for the Stormrazor, it just really allows him to continue to pressure his early game advantage. The extra energized damage there on Stormrazor really helps him out. It just gives him a ton of upfront damage, and it allows him to burst really good once he picks that up. That little slow you do get from Stormrazor is also pretty underrated for Draven, because a lot of the time you're going to be up, you're going to be playing aggressive with them in the early game. So if you get an auto off, get the slow from Stormrazor, it's going to allow you to close the gap on that opponent and continue getting autos off, and it's just going to increase your DPS there once you pick up that item. So next up here for Jhin, he is going to be running the exact same build setup as Caitlyn in this patch, which is Infinity Edge into Stormrazor and then a rapid fire cannon. This build is just performing extremely well in Jhin for this patch. Really nice 2-item spike there, similar to the Caitlyn. Just got a lot of DPS output once you pick those 2 items up on Jhin. So this is just the build I'd be looking to go for pretty much every single game on him for this patch. So next up here we got Jinx. So Jinx still does very well with her Infinity Edge into Runaan's setup. That build setup has just been very good on Jinx for a very long time now, and it just synergizes very well with her kit. Her rocket synergizing with the Runaan's bolts there, just really nice for a mid-game spike. But going for Stormraiser as a third item is doing great on Jinx for this patch, so that's where I would look to incorporate it into your build path. So for Caixa in this patch, she is actually performing much better with a Stormraiser Rush into a Rageblade and a Runaan's instead of going for like a Manamune into the Rageblade and then Runaan's. The Manamune build on this patch is just being outperformed pretty heavily by the Stormraiser Rush. Stormraiser Rush is just going to give you a much better early to mid game spike. If you're going for the Manamune, you're going for the tier, you just really lack in any sort of early game pressure with that build on Caixa, and that's where she does really struggle. So by going for the Stormraiser, it just allows you to get past that early game a little bit easier, gives you some more kill potential in the early to mid game there. So I would be looking to go for Stormraiser pretty much every single game on Caixa for 9.23. If we take a look at KogMaw now, not too many people at all are running Stormraiser on him for this patch. I'd say that Bork into Rageblade and Runaan's is still going to be your go-to setup that you'd want to run pretty much all the time, but an interesting take on a new setup is the Stormraiser into Hurricane and then Infinity Edge. Basically what you're getting by going for this setup is you're just getting a lot more upfront damage, a lot more crit there with this build setup as well, so you don't have to wait on the Rageblade to get stacking in team fights for your DPS to really kick in. With the Stormraiser, the Runaan's, and Infinity Edge, you are just gonna have a lot more raw upfront damage with that setup. So next up here for Lucian, Stormraiser Rush is performing very well on him for this patch, and we're seeing Stormraiser doing very good as a first item on AD carries who do have better early games. So Draven, Lucian, we're going to be talking about Tristana in a little bit. So any AD carry that can really pressure an all-in the laning phase, or that can really benefit from the extra energized damage coming out of Stormraiser and the crit that you get from the item is very good with it as a rush item there. So if you're snowballing in the early game, if you're doing very well with Lucian, then I would go for Stormraiser as a rush item there, and it's just going to allow you to continue snowballing really hard. And then for the Bork setup, it goes back to when I was talking about Ashe earlier on in the video. If you're not basing at a very good time to where you can pick up Stormraiser, go Bork. If the enemy team does have a lot more tankier champions, a lot more champions that are going to be stacking health, then you can still go for the Bork on Lucian. For the Misfortune setup, she is still doing very well with an Essence Reaver into Infinity Edge, so I wouldn't pass up on those two items as your core items for 923, but as for your third item on MF, she is doing very good with either a Stormraiser, a Bloodthirster, even a Rapid Fire Cannon. It kind of does come down to the game, comes down to personal preference. If you're having a hard time staying alive in fights, if there's a lot of champions diving onto you, then I'd probably go for Bloodthirster there, just to give yourself some more survivability from the lifesteal and the shield. If you're having a hard time dealing with tanks in fights, then going for the Stormraiser there is a pretty good option, gives you more crit. You're going to have 75% crit there with those three items, so you're going to have a much easier time shredding through tanks in fights. For the Rapid Fire Cannon, if you're having a difficult time reaching targets in fight, if you want that extra range you get from Rapid Fire Cannon, then that is still a great option as well. Moving on to Sivir now, she's doing great with the Stormraiser slotted into her second item slot. You still do want to go for your Essence Reaver as a rush item on Sivir. You want to be spamming out your abilities as much as possible on Sivir, so having the mana back there from the Essence Reaver is very good for the champion. Going for Stormraiser second though, and Infinity Edge third, very high DPS build for Sivir, lots of AD, lots of crit for this setup, so you're going to be hurting very hard in the mid game once you do pick these up. So next up here for Tristana, Stormraiser Rush doing really good for her in this patch, an AD carry who does have the potential to look for all-ins, to look to play aggressive in the early to mid game there. So with the Stormraiser, lots of upfront damage for Tristana, what she wants, so she does have the ability to look for more aggressive plays and burst a champion out very quickly. So next up for Twitch, she's doing very well with the exact same setups that Ashe is doing well with in this patch, so I don't want to repeat myself again and go over as to why you'd want to run either setup on Twitch. Basically, what I said for Ashe goes exactly for Twitch with these two setups. So next here for Varus, he's still doing great with a Bork into a Rageblade and Runan, so that on-hit setup is still very good for him for this patch, but if you want more so of a burstier setup, if you want a ton of upfront damage, then a Stormraiser into Static Shiv and Infinity Edge is going to give you exactly that. So the energized damage coming out of Stormraiser along with Static Shiv just allows you to pretty much one-shot a target if you do hit your ultimate on them, so it gives you a very good two-item spike there, a lot of burst potential. So if you are snowballing really hard in the early game, definitely try the Stormraiser into Static Shiv build out on Varus. So next here for Vayne, I would say that Bork into Rageblade and then your Phantom Dancer there or your Infinity Edge is still the setup that I'd be running pretty much every game on her. Those two items just synergize way too well with her kit that I just don't think it's really worth passing up on them. But if you do want to go for a crit setup on Vayne for this patch and try that out, then the Stormrazor into PD and Infinity Edge is actually performing very well on her for 923. And then lastly, to round it out here, for Ziya, she is doing great with the same setup that Sivir's performing well with in this patch of the Essence Reaver into Stormrazor and then Infinity Edge. Not a ton of people are actually running Stormrazor on Ziya for this patch, which is pretty surprising, but the people who are performing very, very well. It's like outperforming pretty much every single build on Ziya for 9.23, so you can still go for the Rapid Fire Cannon as your second item there, but by going for Essence Reaver into Stormrazor and Infinity Edge just gives you a ton of DPS potential with 3 items. So that is going to be all, guys. Hopefully this is helpful, and hopefully this now does give you a pretty good idea of what you should be building on your AD carries for 923. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.